Welcome back, everybody, to the next episode of the podcast. We've got a pretty fun episode here with week 1 of the NFL season in the books. We'll be reviewing the week, going over some overreactions or avoiding said overreactions. We'll be talking about the MLB playoff run. We'll be giving our Western Conference NBA playoff predictions. And then for our fun and game segment, we're doing something totally different that we've never done that I think you guys are going to enjoy. As always, I am joined by my good pal, Mr. Nickinator.
Imagine not being 1-0 to start the season.
Facts. Imagine. There's 16 poverty franchises who are 0-1. Couldn't be us. So let's not waste any time and let's get started. So week 1, of course, is now done, and it was entertaining as usual. It's nice having NFL football back. Boy, did I miss it. And that led me to having a pretty fun weekend because we had some pretty crazy games. The most interesting ones for me, obviously, got to start on Thursday night. Big win for the Lions at Arrowhead. If the Chiefs have Chris Jones or Travis Kelce, I don't think Detroit wins. So good on the Lions for taking advantage of their opportunity with both of those guys out. Part of the whole reason why I was excited about playing the Chiefs early is that teams are generally flat, especially teams who didn't play a lot of their main guys, especially their quarterback in preseason. Now, this doesn't really apply to the Chiefs because they did those things, but they also didn't have 2 of their best players. We saw a few other teams go noticeably flat. The Bills looked bad. The Bengals looked bad. I'm really not worried about these teams. It's week 1. It happens. The Bills played a great defense, and the Bengals usually struggle to open up the year. Obviously, the biggest storyline of the week is Aaron Rodgers tearing his Achilles. It was made official a few hours ago today that he will be done for the year. And last night, Robert Saleh said that Zach Wilson is the Jets' QB1 going forward. I think that would be foolish. If I'm the Jets, I'm calling Carolina right now, offering a 3 for Andy Dalton. I think there are other solid options out there. I think Dalton would be at the top of my list of realistic gets for them to try to salvage what could be a really special team. I get Andy Dalton probably doesn't win you a Super Bowl, but you've got to try, right? You've gone all in just for this, so I feel like that would be a little foolish. And then we saw some other teams play really well. Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley look good. The 49ers look unbelievable. The Cowboys look great. The Dolphins' offense should be really fun again. The Chargers' offense should be a lot of fun too.
Yeah, this week, looking at the games, it's week 1. Everyone's going to come out flat. There was not a lot of offense, and even in the one game where a team scored 40 points, they had, I think, 2 defense touchdowns, and they had a special team touchdown. So a lot of it wasn't the offense. This week, a lot of the offense was mid. But I do want to point out your enemy, who both teams that we actually kind of like going into this season, the Packers, Jordan Love came out great as his first game starting without Rodgers being injured. And he looked fantastic against the Bears. Aaron Rodgers handed the deed to the city of Chicago to Jordan Love, who came out firing without his wide receiver 1, might I add. So, O-line's healthy, and he's got a great connection with Dobbs. Aaron Jones owns the Chicago, apparently. But I do want to point out a lot of these young QBs. Brock Purdy looked fairly good coming off that injury. We got to see Sam Howell and Desmond Ridder make some of the first starts that they made. They both got the win. They both kind of just had the game managed because the Falcons, they have the best running back duo in the league. So they'd kind of run the ball down the Panthers' throats. And speaking of the Panthers, Bryce Young did not look the greatest. He had some good throws. The touchdown throw he had to the back of the end zone was a fantastic throw. But 2 interceptions for him. Not the greatest start. C.J. Stroud, his team didn't even score a touchdown. I think he looked solid, but also you didn't score a touchdown. I know it's the Ravens. It's week 1. But still, there's going to be growing pains, though, so I'm not worried. But Anthony Richardson coming out at home against Jacksonville, the team who just everyone's assuming going to win the division. And you come out, and he did pretty good. I think he had 2 total touchdowns. He did have an interception to Tyson Campbell. But that first 3 quarters, he looked fairly good. And I think going forward, that connection between AR and Shane Steichen, who is the main guy who helped develop Jalen Hurts into who he is now, is going to be able to help AR. And I think that's the one guy you want to see with AR to help develop him into the best player he could possibly be.
We're also going to give our players of the week for week 1. We're going to do offense, defense, and special teams for both conferences. So for me in the AFC, my offensive player of the week is Tyreek Hill. He was the best player in the league this week. Defensively, I went with Jordan Whitehead with the Jets. I mean, the 3 interceptions speak for themselves. I thought about TJ Watt and Josh Allen here, but we're going to go with Whitehead. And then the special teams player of the week, it's got to be Xavier Gibson with the punt return touchdown to win the game for the Jets in overtime. In the NFC, I really wanted to give Brandon Ayuk the offensive player of the week, but I'm going to give it to his teammate Christian McCaffrey, who had an unbelievable game. Defensively, shout out to Drake Jackson with San Francisco. He was really good, but I'm going to give it to Jesse Bates with Atlanta. He had 2 interceptions. He looked really good. And then my special teams player of the week is going to be Jake Elliott. 4 for 4 on field goals, 2 for 2 from 50-plus yards out. He was really good, and no one's really talked about him, probably because he's a kicker.
Yeah, a lot of these are going to be the exact same. Tyreek Hill was the best player in week 1. He has to be it for the AFC offensive player. Again, Jordan Whitehead, 3 interceptions. I was going to pick TJ Watt because 3 sacks and 2 forced fumbles. That's pretty damn good, but 3 interceptions, I would argue, is a little better. Xavier Gibson is the answer for special teams, but I do want to mention Nick Folk for the Titans, who had 5 field goals, I think. It went 5 for 5, 2 over 50 yards. He was probably the best kicker. It just sucks that the team didn't score any touchdowns. For NFC offensive player, I looked at CMC, I looked at Brandon Ayuk, but my agenda is here, and I'm going with Jordan Love. 3 touchdowns to start off your career with the Packers, kind of kicking off that new era and putting down the Bears narrative. Really like seeing it. NFC defensive player of the year, maybe a year. Jesse Bates, 2 interceptions, did really good. It helped stop Bryce Young. Jesus, why do I keep trying to think Bryce Love, of all guys? And NFC special teams, I'm going with Noah Igbinoghene, who is the guy who returned the blocked kick for a touchdown in the Dallas Giants game. But I do like the Jake Elliott pick. He was very good for us.
So that's our review of Week 1 of the NFL, and we'll be talking about the NFL a little bit later in the episode, but now we're going to shift our attention to the MLB season, the playoff race, and some of the young guys who have recently been called. The MLB season is winding down. We've got 3-ish weeks left to go. The playoff race is on, and with us being in the month of September, we are seeing a lot of young guys around the league being called up, with roster sizes increasing. Some of the notable names who have been called up include just yesterday, Pete Crow Armstrong with the Cubs, Evan Carter with Texas, Jason Dominguez with the Yankees had been performing really well, and then he tears his UCL and is out for the year. The Yankees have called up a few other young guys as well. Got to give a shout out to Parker Meadows in Detroit. He has had some good moments with the Tigers, which has been really fun to see, and I imagine we're going to continue to see some guys move up and down the minors as we get closer and closer to the end of the year.
Yeah, the big name to look out for was Jason Dominguez until he injured his UCL. But he's been probably the big name to look out for, not just in the Yankees organization, but kind of in all of baseball. He's been compared to Mike Trout. And because he plays for the Yankees, obviously Babe Ruth, but I'm not going to say he's going to be Babe Ruth. But first at bat, you hit a home run off future Hall of Famer Justin Verlander. I know he's not the same, but it's still Justin Verlander. That's pretty damn good. And you mentioned a lot of other names. It's pretty much everybody that I wanted to mention. I wish Andrew Painter would be one of the guys coming up, but he is still recovering from his injury, which is very upsetting to me. But I do like seeing a lot of teams bring up their young guys, not trying to influence their service time so they can stay under team control longer. I do like seeing the new approach that a lot of these teams are taking, that they think, okay, we're out of the playoffs, let's bring these young guys up and let's get them some time in the MLB, and maybe they'll be able to get into the MLB next year. Because even guys who were drafted a couple months ago, they're already in AA. Paul Skeens, Max Clark, they're pushing AA, even AAA at this point, and they were drafted 4 months ago.
So now let's talk about the playoff races. The wild card races are obviously heating up. Let's pull up the standings real quick, just so we can get a numbers representation of what everything looks like. So we will start in the American League. The AL East is super close. The Orioles have the slight edge. The AL West is a 3-team race with the Astros, Rangers, and Mariners all within 2.5 games of each other. And then the wild card is very close in the AL. There's really 4 teams fighting for 3 spots. Say that the Astros and the Orioles do end up winning their divisions. Right now, we've got the Rays, who are comfortably the number 1 spot. There's going to be 2 AL East teams in the playoffs, at least. But really, those last 2 spots come down to presumably Toronto, Texas, and Seattle, all of whom are within a game of each other. So that's going to be super close down to the wire. The Mariners were playing really well. Now, not so much. They've lost 4 in a row. They've kind of gotten out of their August mojo that really propelled them back into the playoff race. And then as we look at the National League, the Braves have already clinched a playoff spot. They're going to clinch their division very soon, likely within the next couple of days. They'll probably get the number 1 seed unless the Dodgers go on some crazy run. Right now, it looks like the Brewers are going to win the Central. The Cubs only 3 back as well. And then as we look at the wild card, again, really close. The Phillies, I think I'd be very surprised if they don't get a spot. And it's looking good for the Cubs as well. But after that, we've kind of got a 4-team race with the Diamondbacks, Giants, Marlins, and Reds, all for that last spot. Arizona seems to have the edge, and I kind of have a hard time thinking that the 3 teams currently in those spots, the Phillies, Cubs, and Diamondbacks, will not make the playoffs. I think they all will, but you do have to watch out for those teams behind. The Giants have won 4 in a row after a long losing streak, and the Marlins have been playing pretty well over the last couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, looking at those wild card teams, those are the kind of the things that you want to be looking out for. I know in the AL, no one has clinched the playoffs yet, but we can kind of, unless an utter collapse happens, we can kind of shoe in Baltimore and Tampa Bay into at least making the playoffs at some point. Houston is the most hot for the AL West right now. Texas has been a slump since probably mid-August. Seattle, after their hot 2-3 weeks, has settled back down. So that the West Division is going to be a dogfight, but between Tampa Bay, Toronto, Texas, Seattle, you could see a team like Boston kind of kick it up a little bit, try and sneak in over a team like Seattle or Texas. But like you mentioned, it's probably going to be between those main 4 teams with Tampa Bay, Toronto, Texas, Seattle. But with how cold's Texas been, I wouldn't be shocked if they get even colder and a team like Seattle could sneak in ahead of them. Maybe even the Guardians try and win a couple games to get past Minnesota, but whoever wins that division is just going to lose anyways. It's round 1. But with the National League, it's going to be Atlanta. It's going to be the Dodgers. I don't think any other teams are going to be able to challenge them. The Phillies are like 15 games back from Atlanta or something like that. It's a lot. They're by far in the way the best team in the league right now. I'm not worried about trying to win the division at this point. I want to make sure my team gets a wild card spot. But the fight for the NL Central with Milwaukee and the Cubs is going to be really close. It's only a 2-game difference. And the Cubs are a team where they can get hot real fast. They did it right before the deadline. They got Yamir Candelario. So now they're kind of trying to make that push, trying to get back to the playoffs. And neither of these teams are teams that I think are going to be able to go far in the playoffs because Milwaukee doesn't have an offense. And the Cubs are more balanced, but I don't think they have enough to kind of push through. But looking at those bottom 4 teams, Arizona, Miami, San Fran, Cincy, those are all teams who are only 2 games apart from each other. So it's going to be a dogfight for that last wild card spot. And maybe your hopes and dreams will come true. Maybe San Diego will remember how to play baseball and can maybe make a push. They're 8 games back, which is a lot, but we've seen crazier. We've seen the Cardinals win 18 games in a row and make the playoffs. So anything can happen in these last couple games.
I've given up on San Diego a while ago. Let's move over to the NBA now. We're going to go over our Western Conference predictions. We're going to go over our seeding, who we think makes the play-in and playoffs, along with the teams that we think could go far in the postseason and end up making the finals. The NBA season is creeping up on us. We're a little bit over a month away, and we're going to go over our predictions for the Western Conference. In the next episode, you guessed it, we're going to go over the Eastern Conference. So I'll go first. These are the 6 teams in order who I have making the postseason. I've got Denver, the Clippers, the Suns, the Warriors, the Lakers, and the Grizzlies. I think the most interesting of that group would probably be the Clippers getting second place. The Clippers are kind of like the Padres of the NBA to me. I want to believe in them, and I really like the talent they have, but they just never put it together. I'm not saying this is going to be the year, but with a lot of the new rules for awards and whatnot, for players needing to play 65 games to be eligible for awards, and rules of not having multiple stars sit out the same game, that's going to put pressure on the Clippers to play their two best players, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, if the rules are enforced well, which is obviously, who knows, these are new rules. But if those guys play a lot, they're going to play well, and the Clippers are going to be quite good. As for the teams in the play-in, I've got Sacramento in 7th. I have them regressing a little bit, but still a strong year. And then OKC, Dallas, and Minnesota. There's going to be somebody good who's left out of the playoffs, and for me, that's New Orleans. If the Pelicans stay healthy, if Zion Williamson plays 65, 70 games, not only do I think the Pelicans make the play-in, but I think they're a top 5 seed in the conference. The problem is he has never done that, and I can't expect that all of a sudden now. I don't think Brandon Ingram can drag the rest of the roster, because when Zion was not on the floor, this team was quite bad. When he was on the floor, this team looked like one of the better teams in the conference, so they could be interesting. Dallas is an interesting one as well. They certainly have a higher ceiling than 9th, having a very talented backcourt with Luka and Kyrie, but the two of them didn't necessarily work well in the limited games they played last year, and I'm not sold on the rest of the roster. The 5 teams I have missing altogether, obviously I mentioned New Orleans. Houston and San Antonio both could be frisky. They have a lot of young talent, San Antonio particularly. I feel like people kind of just view that as Wemby's team, which is true, but I think the rest of the roster is better than people think. And then the only 2 teams who I feel like could be really bad are Utah and Portland. The Jazz have some intriguing talent. I don't know if Lauri Markkanen keeps this pace up. And then if the Blazers trade Damian Lillard, I think they could be quite bad. As for in the playoffs, the team I have making the finals this year will be, at least as of now, this is subject to change, but I'm going to say that the Phoenix Suns make the finals. I am a believer in Kevin Durant and Devin Booker as a duo. I like some of the moves they made in the offseason. Obviously, Chris Paul is gone, but they've added some other pieces, Bradley Beal in particular. I think DeAndre Ayton really could bounce back, and I really like a lot of the depth additions that they made. I thought, considering the circumstances, they managed their offseason pretty well.
I will point out, I think you picked the Suns last year, so we'll see if that plays out for you again. But for my first 6 seeds, in order, I have Denver Nuggets, the Suns, the Pelicans at 3, the Clippers, the Lakers, and the Kings. Now, obviously, there's a big thing with me putting the Pelicans at 3. My thing is, you mentioned it, that when Zion was on the court, this team was incredibly good. This team was good enough to be the 1 seed while Zion was healthy. When they had Zion, they were the 1 seed. They were the best team in the West. Do I think they're going to be the best team in the West? No, I have them at 3. But this is me thinking Zion's going to be healthy. He's going to lose some weight, and he's going to be back at it going again. And if he's on that court, this team is going to make the playoffs. Maybe not as high as 3, but I get like a King situation almost, where you don't think much is going to happen with them. But if Zion stays healthy, the connection between him, Brandon Ingram, the rest of the team, I think they're going to be really good with Zion on the court. It's the big question of if Zion is healthy. If he's not, then my whole prediction is just crap, throw it out the window. But if he is healthy, I think they will do very good, and I think they'll be able to make the playoffs. The rest of these teams, I think they are all playoff teams. Nuggets are the Nuggets. The Suns have one of the best starting rosters in the league. The Clippers, I almost put it 2, but I want to relax a little bit on them. But I get exactly where you're coming from. The Lakers have a lot of depth behind Bron and AD. Austin Reeves is kind of coming to his own. So I like what they have going on. They could be higher than 5 even. The Kings, like you said, I think they're going to regress. I still give them top 6 seed, but I do think they're going to regress a little bit. And then for the play-in, there's going to be a certain team missing. In the order, Grizzlies, Thunder, Mavericks, Timberwolves. I think you can notice that there is a certain Golden State team that is not in. I wanted to try and be bold. We did NFL predictions not too long ago. I was very chalky. I wanted to find a way to do something bold. It's probably going to be very wrong, but Steph's getting older. Clay has already started to regress. He's getting older. Draymond is already regressing. He's getting older. The rest of the roster isn't the great. You have Chris Paul, but he's there to be the leader of the second unit, and he's old too. It's a very old roster, and it's a roster that's regressing. Steph is still Steph. I'm not too worried about him, but the rest of that roster is just, it's digressing. It's getting worse by the year, and I think we can all see it. It's still the Golden State Warriors. They could be the top 6 seed, and they could do whatever, but last year they were so bad on the road, and I know they have Chris Paul to help when Steph isn't on the court, because when Steph wasn't on the court, they were just not a good team. Just flat out not a good team. And even with the second unit, I don't know how the chemistry is going to work, because they've been fighting Chris Paul at this point. And for Chris Paul's whole career, they hate Chris Paul. So it's going to be interesting how that plays out. But the actual play-in teams I think the Thunder are going to be really good now that they're adding a guy like Chet Holmgren. If he's healthy, I think they'll be a lot better. I wanted to put them in the top 6, but I didn't want to go too crazy. The Grizzlies, they were the 2 seed, but I think they're going to fall back a bit, mainly because Jaw's out for the first half of the year. So it's going to be a little slow to start, but I think at the end of the year, they'll pick it up, get into the play-in at least. The Mavericks, I think we had in the same spot. It's going to be between Luka and Kyrie, seeing if they can kind of meld. They have a whole offseason to kind of get together, kind of work with each other. The whole season to work with each other. I think they'll be a lot better. And the fact that Kyrie actually re-signed here and didn't just leave, I think he actually wants to be here with Luka, and he'll actually be willing to play with him. And the T-Wolves, I think they have too much talent to not make it. I think this is going to be the season where we see if Ant wants to leave or not. And if they don't make it far, they're the 10th seed for me, so they're not going to make it far. But if they don't make it far, I think Ant's going to probably want to get out of there. But for predictions, I could go crazy. I could say Pelicans. I could say Clippers. I'm going to be chalky, and I'm just going to say the Nuggets because they are the best team on the planet right now, and I don't see a world where they don't make the finals again unless, something crazy happens to Jokic or Murray. But any of these other teams I could realistically see making the finals. The Suns have a crazy roster. The Pelicans, I'm high on them with Zion. The Clippers have a good roster. The Lakers have one of the best depth in basketball, and unlike the Heat, they have good starters along with the depth. So they could do a lot. They made it to the conference finals last year, so they could definitely do it again. But I will just roll the Nuggets, but I think my bold stuff is just having the Warriors not there.
I don't mind the bold prediction with Golden State. I think their future outlook is a lot worse than people think, and I think Bob Myers leaving this past year kind of signals that this could be the beginning of the end. I don't think it's going to happen as fast as you're predicting, but I do think that the dynasty will be dead before we know it, and I think they could spiral downwards a little bit. So let's now transition to our fun and game segment, which we are excited to introduce to you guys because it's something pretty different. So what we're going to be doing today for our final segment is we will be creating the perfect quarterback, running back, and receiver based on players from the 2000s, and this idea was inspired by Brett Coleman. I assume all of you probably know who he is if you don't live under a rock. If you don't know who he is, he's a great football mind. You should check him out. He knows what he's talking about. So basically, we have a few different superlatives in a way for each position, and we're going to pick somebody who has played within the 2000s and has had their prime within the last 20 years at that spot. So we're going to start with wide receiver, and I will go first. So for size, I don't know if there's another choice other than Calvin Johnson. The guy was 6'5", 240 pounds, and was a total freak. For launch speed and quickness, I am going with Tyreek Hill. He is the most explosive wide receiver I think I have ever seen in my entire life. I feel like I would be remiss if I went with a different answer. For hands, I'm going to go with Larry Fitzgerald. I know there's this famous stat out there of he has more tackles than drops. I think that stat has proven to be a myth, but Larry Fitzgerald's hands are still unbelievable. Next up, we've got body control, and I thought about Calvin here because he's so big, but I'm going to go with a different Johnson, with Andre Johnson. He had a very good career, mainly with the Houston Texans. I feel like he's become, over time, pretty underrated. I don't think enough people talk about him as one of the best receivers of the 2000s, but he was special. For route running, I'm going to go with Steve Smith. I think especially in the short game, his quickness and his route running ability is really impressive. He can stretch the field as well if needed. I kind of thought about Antonio Brown a little bit there as well, but I'm going to go with Steve Smith. And then blocking, there was a very small part of me that wanted to pick J.J. Arcega-Whiteside because that was the one trait that he had, and he was damn good at it. But I'm going to go with Reggie Wayne instead. He was a very good blocker back in his day.
So for mine, I tried to do a different player for every category. To start, I went the same with you. Besides, the answer is Calvin Johnson. I don't think there is any other option you can go with there. For long speed, this might be a little controversial, but I went with Randy Moss. His whole gimmick was just running a go route, putting his hand up, and just beating his man. If he didn't beat his man, he'd just jump on top of you. His long speed that's what he made a career out of. For quickness, Tyreek Hill is a very good answer. But I'm biased, and I went to Sean Jackson. He is one of the most agile and just quick players we've seen. And for the guy who has, I think, the record for either 50-plus yard or 60-plus yard touchdowns in history, he's pretty damn quick. For hands, I went with Larry Fitzgerald. I think that is the answer. That stat with him having more tackles than drops, it is true. The number is just wrong. There's more tackles and more drops involved. But yeah, he has more tackles than drops, which is a fact. For body control, I see this as pretty much being able to get your feet down, toe tapping and whatnot. AJ Green is a very popular answer, and I like that answer. But I went to Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown is one of the best players I've seen in his prime. People think of him, he's insane, obviously, now. But in his prime, when he was on the Steelers, he was one of the best players on getting the ball and making sure he stayed in bounds when he got it. For route running, there's a lot of answers I could have gone with. This was one of the harder ones for me. I ended up landing on Marvin Harrison. His son's going to be in the league. He's going to be insane. But when he was on the Colts with Peyton Manning, he was probably the reason why Peyton Manning didn't struggle so much. Like, obviously, Peyton Manning's good, but Marvin Harrison is just elite when it comes to his route running. There's a lot of players that could have gone here. Steve Smith, Wes Welker, they're all great answers. But I just landed Marvin Harrison. For blocking, I love that you mentioned JJW. I love him for that. Larry Fitzgerald is probably the best blocking tight end wide receiver ever. But I went with Julio Jones just because whenever he blocks, he just puts his corner on his ass, and it's really funny to me. So we went with Julio Jones.
Is it bad that I'm not entirely convinced that this player is better than Calvin? I don't know why.
Calvin's really good.
All right, let's move over to running back now. We'll start with vision. I went with LaDainian Tomlinson. Obviously, he was insane with the Chargers. I don't know if we've seen a better run from a running back over the last 20 years, other than maybe Adrian Peterson. For contact balance, I decided to go with Nick Chubb. I think Nick Chubb has a good ability of a combination of breaking tackles along with being able to, once he kind of gets hit, he's able to regain his momentum pretty quickly and keep going at close to full speed. So that's going to be my answer there. For power, I was torn between Derrick Henry and Marshawn Lynch. You can't go wrong either way, but I'm going to go with the king. Give me Derrick Henry. For durability, Frank Gore was a starting running back in this league for 15 years. I feel like he's got to be the answer. For receiving, this was a tough one. I thought about Matt Forte. I thought about Austin Eckler. But I'm going to go with Christian McCaffrey. I think he's the best receiving back we've seen in a long time. I also went with CMC for agility. His quickness is special. I think being, partly a wide receiver in a way with a wide receiver skill set, but being out of the backfield certainly helps with that. And then with acceleration, I kind of tied acceleration and launch speed together in a way. But I think even if it is just acceleration, I'm probably still picking Chris Johnson. But yeah, that'll be my choice there. I'm going with CJ2K.
For vision, for me, I went with Le'Veon Bell, mainly because of his ability to wait for a hole to open up, and as soon as he saw that hole, he is shooting down that gap. There's a lot of players nowadays that try and do that. I think Najee Harris is one, and he just can't do it. But Le'Veon Bell is really good when it comes to vision of a running back. For contact balance, I went with Nick Chubb 1.0 in Marshawn Lynch. The Beast Quick run in general is my main reason why I picked Marshawn Lynch, but it was very hard to tackle that man. He's pretty much just a shorter version of Derrick Henry, which is just Nick Chubb. For raw power, Nick Chubb is a really good answer. Derrick Henry's maybe the answer, but I went with Adrian Peterson. I think he's one of the best backs ever, and he was always really good at everything. He's always really fast, but he's really strong, and he's able to put people on their backs very easily. And when you take 2 torn ACLs and then rush for 2,000 yards, I don't even care what you do. You're getting on here at some point. For durability, it has to be Frank Gore. That is the answer. He had a 16-year career. I checked because I was curious. And he was a good starter for pretty much all 16 years of his career. Like, I think in terms of numbers, his stats, if you take, like, current running backs now and, like, double it, it's still less than what Derrick Henry or Frank Gore has, which is hilarious. For receiving, there's a lot of answers. Austin Eckler, CMC, Darren Sproles, because I'm biased. But I went with Matt Forte. I think he's just really good in terms of that receiving game. He's pretty much just Chicago's version of Darren Sproles, but I wanted to try and avoid too many Eagles. For agility, Shady McCoy is one of the popular answers, I would think. I went with LaDainian Tomlinson. I can say names. But his ability to kind of just get out of what he needed to do, or get out of the way, just make those cuts, make the jukes, the spins. He was one of the few people who were able to do that, like the 3-cut juke, which is ridiculously hard to do. I've done it. It hurts. It's really painful. And for acceleration, the only answer is CJ2K. Even if you don't account speed, he went from 0 to 60 in like 2 seconds. Like, there's a reason why he had 2,000 yards and then never did anything. It's because that year, when he had 2,000 yards, he just did what he wanted. He got the ball on a toss, he found a hole, and just ran to the end zone.
So now we're going to go over our perfect quarterback. For size, I'm going to go with Cam Newton. The guy is built like a Greek god, so I feel like he's the best choice there. For accuracy, I went with Tom Brady. The guy doesn't miss too many throws. For arm strength, I went with Josh Allen. I can't think of the player off the top of my head who recently has had a stronger arm than him, even though at times it can cost him a little bit. Cough, cough last night. But I still think he's the answer. Mobility was a tough one. I thought about Michael Vick. I even thought about Justin Fields for a little bit. But Lamar Jackson won an MVP because of his mobility inside and outside of the pocket. I'm going to pick him there. Durability, Brett Favre has by far the most consecutive games started in NFL history, so he's going to be my answer. For IQ, I don't think there's another answer other than Tom Brady. And then for improvising, there was a small part of me that wanted to pick Patrick Mahomes because of his ability to escape pressure in and outside of the pocket. But his decision-making when improvising is not always perfect, so instead I decided to go with Aaron Rodgers.
So again, I'm trying to go with different players for each category. For size, I went the same way with you did. Cam Newton. I think he was like 6'5", like 240. Dude's huge, and throwing on all these other attributes to a guy with the size of Cam Newton is hilariously ridiculous. For accuracy, I went with the guy who I think is the most accurate QB ever. Maybe a hot take. Drew Brees. I think he made a career on just being accurate. He rarely ever left that pocket, and when he needed to, he would still make a pretty goddamn good throw. For arm, Josh Allen and Mahomes are really good options, but prime Aaron Rodgers had one of the best arms ever. He's out there hitting scoreboards. He would throw it 70 yards vertically and 70 yards horizontally. His arm was hilariously good. For mobility, I don't know if I'm a hater. I went with Michael Vick. Michael Vick to Lamar, or 1A, 1B. You could go either or. I don't mind. For durability, it feels weird putting Tom Brady at durability of all things, but he has the most games played, and besides the year he tore his ACL, he has played at least 14 games in every season he's played. And besides one season where he played 14, the rest he played 16 or 17. So he's very good at not getting hurt. The last Super Bowl he was in, he was injured, and he still played through it. Brett Favre is probably the second best option, though. I'll give you that. For IQ, if it's not Brady, it's Peyton Manning. He is one of the smartest to ever do it. There's a reason why he's been getting countless nods to maybe coaching at some point. I hope eventually he gets to go be a QB coach, turns a QB into like a god, and then can go coach like the Colts whenever they realize, no, wait, they have Shane Steichen. Why would I give her Shane Steichen? He's great. Anyways, I'm rambling. Improvisation. This is pretty much who I think he's able to extend the play, get out of the pocket, and make a good throw, and make actually like a good, smart decision. And that's Russell Wilson to me. I think there's so many plays where you just watch him just run around for like 10, 15 seconds, and then he throws like a 20, 30-yard laser down the field. It is hilarious what he can do when in his prime. During those years in Seattle, he was ridiculously good. I think he went to the Super Bowl his second year, I think, which is kind of crazy. Like, that's what Mahomes did. And we all love Mahomes. He's great. But Russell Wilson was really good during those like early 2010s Seattle years. And there's like countless plays where, like I said, he runs for 10 seconds, throws 15 yards down the field to Doug Baldwin, and those highlights alone, I think he has to be improvisation. And I don't know who else it would be besides like Mahomes.
I think you're pretty much spot on there with Russell Wilson. I originally wrote him down for improvising. It's kind of a crime that he has never gotten an MVP vote, yet Justin Fields and Geno Smith had. I feel like he, off the top of my head, he might be the most underrated player at the 2010s. He was so good for so long. So that's pretty much going to wrap up today's episode. A shorter one, but a fun one nonetheless. Let us know which of our players is the better one. Nick and Ader went with the moral route by picking different players across the board, while I did not make rules because rules are stupid. So if you have anything to finish us off with, let it out.
Not much. Just the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl, the Phillies are going to win the World Series, and the Sixers aren't going to do anything again.
All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed. Next episode will be hopefully fairly soon. Peace out.